Imagine the Quran as a living dialogue, and half its listeners were silenced. What if the divine message gains a new dimension when heard through a woman's heart? Too long, interpretation has echoed only male certainty. Now we must ask, can true monotheism endure without the feminine insight woven into every verse? Universal address, the Quran speaks to insan, mankind, embracing every soul, not merely men. At its core lies the promise, whoever works righteousness, whether male or female, enters paradise. Q 4:124. This all-inclusive grammar demands that women claim equal authority in unveiling divine wisdom. Aisha's sharp intellect. Aisha bint Abi Bakr narrated over 2,000 hadiths and directly corrected leading jurists on questions of prayer, inheritance, and ritual purity. Her example shows that the Prophet, peace be upon him, entrusted women not as passive transmitters, but as active shapers of law. Fatima al-Fikhri's enduring legacy. The founder of the world's first university in 859 CE, Fatima al-Fikhri institutionalized female scholarship. Her vision reminds us, the pursuit of ilm was never designed to be a male monopoly. Excavating marginalized voices. In classical tafsir, insights from women, like the nuances behind Asma bint Yazid's purity question, were footnotes at best. Modern feminist hermeneutes dig into these margins, unearthing interpretive currents that affirm women's autonomy, intellect, and spiritual leadership. Toward a feminine hermeneutics, Arabic's very roots speak of nurture, rada, birth, walada, and care, rahma. A feminine reading of the text highlights God's life-giving and loving attributes as primary lenses for law and ethics, rather than peripheral metaphors. When law speaks in abstractions, lives fracture at its edges. Islamic inheritance and marriage regulations have been read as immutable scripts, often sidelining women's agency. Yet the Quran's vision of justice calls us to question, do these rules protect dignity or simply preserve patriarchal privilege? Inheritance's hidden equity, the oft-cited verse, stipulates 2 female shares equal 1 male, Q 4:11, but its broader context demands redress for widows, orphans, and debtors. Early communities saw this as revolutionary, granting women property rights unseen in contemporaneous codes. Over centuries, jurists ossified the ratios, obscuring the Quran's intent to secure social welfare rather than perpetuate gender hierarchy. When Muslim societies face wealth disparities today, clinging to rigid shares without considering need or consensus twists mercy into mechanical calculation. Marriage as mutual contract. The Quran declares marriage a garment for mutual comfort, Q 2:187, emphasizing companionship over control. The bride's mahar is not a bride price, but a symbol of respect and economic security. Yet traditional practice often treats mahar as a woman's bondage, an asset held hostage to marital compliance. What if we restored mahar to its original purpose, a catalyst for female empowerment and relational harmony, rather than a tool for patriarchal leverage? Polygamy's conditional ethos. Verse 4:3 permits up to 4 wives, only if men can ensure absolute justice. Classical jurists debated whether perfect equity was humanly possible, thus effectively discouraging polygamy. Modern feminist scholars argue that real-world inequities, emotional, financial, make the practice inherently unjust, urging a return to the Quranic precondition rather than a blanket ban or uncritical acceptance. Divorce and women's autonomy. The Quran provides for mutual arbitration and the possibility of khul, woman-initiated divorce, Q 2:29. But patriarchal courts have erected barriers, financial penalties, procedural hurdles that trap women in harmful unions. A feminine hermeneutic insists that freedom to exit must be as accessible as freedom to enter, reflecting the Quranic ethos of dignity and self-determination. Toward a justice of context, the heart of Islamic ethics beats for ADL, balance, and rahmah, compassion. When family law becomes a blunt instrument enforcing power, it betrays both. True fidelity to revelation requires dynamic engagement, applying principles to contemporary realities, ensuring that every woman's right to heritage, respect, and safety is prioritized over inherited customs. True faith dwells in the interplay of seen and unseen. The hijab often becomes the battleground on which debates over piety, power, and women's autonomy are waged. Yet the Quran speaks of modesty as an inner condition, not simply a fabric draped over flesh. How, then, did cloth come to define liberated thought, and can the veil itself become a symbol of radical freedom? From interior modesty to exterior mandate, the command to draw garments over bosoms, Q 2431, was revealed in a society where public women's bodies were once displayed in markets. Its immediate purpose was protection from voyeurism and violence. Over centuries, however, modesty shifted into a rigid external code, measuring devotion by centimeters of coverage rather than depth of character. The hijab as shield and signifier. For some women, the veil is armor, a declaration that their worth transcends the male gaze, a refusal of commodification. For others, it feels like a cage, enforced by patriarchal norms under the guise of piety. In both cases, the hijab's meaning is determined by the freedom to choose it or to remove it, without fear of social or legal reprisal. Embodied theology, body, soul, and sacred space. The Prophet taught that faith is a matter of the heart's conviction, not simply external ritual. A woman's body, far from being a battleground for honor, is a vessel for spirituality, a mosque in miniature. When a community strips agency from her choice of dress, it violates the sanctity of that inner sanctuary. Beyond the veil, reclaiming intimacy. The hijab debate often sidelines questions of sexual ethics, consent, pleasure, and mutual respect. The Quran frames intimacy as garments for one another, Q 2187, implying protection, warmth, and beauty shared freely between equals. Feminist exegesis insists that modesty must include respect for a woman's right to her body and her desires, not only her outward appearance. When visibility becomes resistance. In secular societies where religious symbols are banned, choosing the hijab becomes an act of dissent, asserting that spiritual identity cannot be legislated away. Conversely, in regimes that weaponize the veil, unveiling can be rebellion. True freedom arises when neither state nor society dictates the terms of a woman's visibility. When intimacy becomes a battlefield, bodies bear the scars of law and tradition. Islamic sexual ethics have too often been framed around prohibitions, what one must not do, while neglecting the Quran's vision of mutual well-being. Now we must grapple with consent as sacred covenant, pleasure as God-given right, and the imperative to punish violence rather than desire. Consent as sanctuary. The Prophet emphasized that there is no consent in coercion. Every physical union must be founded on willing participation. Classical jurists spoke of marriage contracts but overlooked ongoing consent. A true sexual ethic centers the moment-to-moment choice of partners, reflecting the Quranic ideal that love blossoms only where hearts and bodies are free. Pleasure in divine design. The Quran likens spouses to garments for one another, Q 2187, symbolizing comfort, beauty, and pleasure. Pleasure is not trivial. It's woven into the divine tapestry of marriage. Medieval poets celebrated erotic love as reflection of mystical union. Reclaiming this heritage means affirming sexual joy as part of worship, not shame. Challenging taboos on feminine desire. Women's sexual agency has been silenced by fears of impropriety, yet the Quran's stories, like that of Prophet Solomon's Hoopoe queen, depict powerful female figures wielding desire and diplomacy. A feminist reading asserts that acknowledging women's libido honors God's creative intent rather than reducing womanhood to passive receptacle. Violence and its prohibition. Domestic violence and marital rape have been shrouded in legal loopholes. The Prophet's model, treating one's spouse with gentleness, never force, should be normative. Any interpretation that excuses violence violates the Quran's prohibition of transgression, Q 2190. True sexual ethics demand zero tolerance for harm, prioritizing protection over patriarchal prerogative. Revisiting zina and privacy adultery, zina carries severe penalties in classical law, yet the Quran insists, if one of you commits it, let's have 4 witnesses, or better, focus on repentance. Q 24, 4-5. By foregrounding privacy and redemption, the text champions restoration over spectacle. In practice, enforcing harsh punishments only fuels secrecy and vulnerability. Toward an ethic of mutual flourishing. A renewed sexual morality celebrates consent as covenant, pleasure as blessing, and safety as non-negotiable. It rejects shame-based policing in favor of education, open dialogue, and community care. When lovers honor each other's dignity, they reflect the divine's mercy, a mercy that transcends taboo and transforms intimacy into an act of worship. In many Muslim contexts, women's participation in education, work, and politics is treated as an afterthought, optional rather than essential. Yet the Quran envisions a society strengthened by the full engagement of every capable soul, regardless of gender. Here, we examine how women's public roles have been both exalted and constrained, and why reclaiming these spaces is crucial for any authentic Islamic polity. Education as a sacred duty, prophetic imperative. The Prophet declared, "Seeking knowledge is obligatory upon every Muslim." He did not qualify Muslim by gender. Early female scholars, Rabi'a al-Adawiyya, al-Darda, taught mosques full of men. Their example shows that learning and teaching are not male monopolies. Medieval universities, at al-Qarawiyyin and al-Azhar, women studied fiqh, philosophy, and medicine. Texts record female jurists issuing legal opinions. Over time, this legacy eroded under patriarchal reinterpretations that confined women to domestic spheres. Modern revival. Today, female enrollment in Islamic universities outpaces men in many countries, yet their voices are muted in faculty and leadership. A truly feminist hermeneutic demands not just access to education, but authority in shaping curricula and issuing legal guidance. Economic participation and financial autonomy. Early Muslim traders, Khadija bint Khuwaylid, a successful merchant, employed the Prophet, peace be upon him, and managed caravans. Her wealth funded the early Islamic community. Islamic law grants women full control over their property and business. Contemporary constraints, legal and cultural barriers, guardianship laws, unequal inheritance practices, restrictions on mobility limit women's economic agency. These not only contradict the Quran's spirit, but weaken families and societies by sidelining half the talent pool. Empowerment models. Microfinance initiatives in Bangladesh and Indonesia show how women's cooperatives reduce poverty and build social capital. When women invest and earn, they become catalysts for communal resilience and mutual support. Political engagement and civic rights. Historic precedents. Women like Aisha and Salama advised leaders, arbitrate disputes, and influenced treaties. Their counsel shaped policy and social norms. Political engagement was never foreign to early Muslim women. Modern exclusions. From bans on women's suffrage in Saudi Arabia until 2015 to quotas forcing token representation elsewhere, political systems often treat female participation as a concession, not a cornerstone. This distorts governance and denies half the population its voice. Feminist legal reform. Countries like Tunisia illustrate how constitutional guarantees for gender parity can transform politics, leading to more responsive laws on family, labor, and education. Islamic democracies must embrace women's leadership to fulfill principles of consultation, shura. Inheritance and beyond, while Part 2 addressed inheritance law's technicalities, implementation often leaves women out. Pressures to cede shares, lack of legal literacy, social stigma. Empowering women requires community mechanisms that ensure rights are known, claimed, and respected. Community Waqf funds. Establishing waqfs to support female victims of domestic violence or to back women entrepreneurs translates inheritance principles into practical solidarity, honoring the Quran's mandate for social justice. Public worship and spiritual leadership. Women-led study circles. Female scholars today host online tafsir sessions attracting thousands worldwide, democratizing access to nuanced exegesis. Yet mosque leadership roles remain overwhelmingly male. Call to prayer and sermons. Historically, women attended mosque lectures and participated in ritual prayer in designated spaces. Some communities now experiment with women-led communal prayers and khutbahs, challenging conventions and reimagining spiritual authority. The Quran enjoins clear guidance on inheritance, yet real-world barriers often render its justice a distant ideal. Here, we explore how women today can move from passive recipients to active claimants of their rightful shares, through legal literacy, communal support structures, and transformative philanthropy. Legal literacy as liberation knowledge is power. Many women never hear the verses on inheritance beyond sermon mentions. Grassroots workshops, led by female scholars and lawyers, translate Q 47-12 into actionable know-how, how to document assets, approach heirs, and navigate court procedures. When women understand the Quranic rationale behind shares, they reclaim agency rather than accept patriarchal ignorance as fate. Testimony of success. In Egypt's Nile Delta, a female legal aid NGO reports that 70% of widows who attended their Share and Dignity seminars successfully secured their Quranic shares, reversing family pressures to cede property. Each woman's victory ripples through her community, reframing inheritance not as abstract law, but as living justice. Community Wahda funds, solidarity. Endowments, inspired by the prophetic practice of waqf, some communities establish heritage funds dedicated to supporting women in inheritance disputes. These endowments cover legal fees, offer temporary housing, and provide counseling, ensuring that financial vulnerability doesn't force a silent surrender of rights. Ethical investment. Managed by mixed-gender boards, these funds invest in women's cooperatives and education bursaries. The returns then circle back to empower more claimants, a virtuous cycle honoring the Quran's concern for orphans, widows, and the marginalized. Q 436. Peer advocacy networks, sister-to-sister councils. Small groups of women meet regularly to share experiences, review each other's documents, and role-play negotiations with male relatives. By externalizing fear and gaining collective confidence, participants transform inheritance from a private grievance into a shared cause. Digital testimonials, #campaigns, number My Share My Right, encourage women to post anonymous stories of claiming inheritance, creating a digital archive of resilience that counters narratives of female passivity. These testimonies, in turn, spur more women to challenge cultural taboos and assert their rights. Engaging religious authority, scholarly partnerships. Progressive ulama partner with community activists to issue non-binding but persuasive fatwas affirming women's rights under Quranic law. When local imams reference these opinions in Friday sermons, they shift social norms, removing religious pretexts for denying shares. Friday. Pledge. In some mosques, imams conclude sermons on inheritance by inviting congregants to verbally pledge respect for women's Quranic shares, publicly binding the community to uphold justice as an act of collective faith. Financial independence through enterprise micro-business, grants, NGOs, and Islamic microfinance institutions provide Sharia-compliant loans specifically for women forced to subsist on meager inheritance. By starting home-based enterprises, tailoring, tutoring, publishing, women convert inherited rights into sustainable livelihoods, breaking cycles of dependency. Market access coalitions, cooperatives negotiate market stalls and e-commerce platforms for female artisans, ensuring that inherited capital translates into ongoing revenue and social recognition. Philosophical reflection. From obligation to opportunity. The Quran frames inheritance not as a burden, but as a social mechanism to distribute wealth equitably and preserve family bonds. When women claim their share, they affirm a divine vision of balance, adl, and mercy, rahma, transforming inheritance disputes into affirmations of dignity. True emancipation arises when every woman sees her right not as a concession, but as a cornerstone of communal well-being, a reminder that Islamic law, at its best, expands freedom rather than restricts it. When the doors of ijtihād were said to have closed, it was largely male voices that declared them sealed. Yet female scholars throughout history, and today's reformers, insist that the well of divine insight never dries. Can women reclaim their place as active jurists, reshaping Sharia from within rather than remaining its passive recipients? Historical precedents of female ijtihād. al-Darda al-Sugra taught Quran and jurisprudence in Damascus, issuing legal opinions to mixed-gender audiences. Her authority was never questioned in her lifetime. Only later narratives relegated her to the margins. Zainab bint al-Kamal, 15th century Cairo, received ijāzas, teaching licenses, from leading scholars, transmitting hadiths and legal rulings across regions. These examples remind us the genius for interpretation is not gendered. Contemporary mujtahidat movements. Women's shura councils in Indonesia and Malaysia convene female and male scholars to debate contentious issues: marriage age, reproductive rights, domestic violence. Their resolutions, while non-binding, carry moral weight and influence local fatwas. Digital fatwa platforms host certified female muftis who answer thousands of questions weekly. on theology, ethics, and daily life, demonstrating that communities trust and seek out women's legal reasoning. Barriers and breakthroughs. Institutional hurdles. Many seminaries still bar women from advanced jurisprudence programs or de facto discourage serious legal training. Grassroots bypass. Where institutions fail, informal networks of study circles, online courses, and mentorships empower women to master Arabic grammar, usul al-fiqh, and maqasid theory, arming them for independent reasoning. Philosophical stakes of inclusive ijtihād. Excluding women from jurisprudence impoverishes our understanding of justice, mercy, and social welfare. A female lens questions assumptions about family roles, economic participation, and bodily autonomy that male jurists may take for granted. When half the Ummah is silenced, Sharia risks ossifying around interests not its own. True revival demands that women not only read the text, but author its living interpretations. Forward path. Institutionalizing female authority. Accredited councils establish mixed mufti boards with guaranteed female representation, whose rulings feed directly into national and local Islamic councils. Educational reform. Update curricula at major seminaries to require women's leadership modules and comparative jurisprudence seminars. Public recognition. Highlight female muftis in Friday sermons, media, and community events, shifting social perception to see women as equals in legal authority. It's time to transform these insights into a bold agenda. Here are the pillars of a woman-led renewal of Islamic scholarship and community. Universal ijāza. Revise admission policies at all major seminaries to automatically grant women equal access to advanced degrees in usul al-fiqh. Establish scholarship funds dedicated to female students in hadith, tafsir, and maqasid studies. Mixed-gender fatwa councils mandate that every national and local fatwa council include at least 40% women with 5-year renewable terms, ensuring sustained female participation in legal rulings. Community study hubs create neighborhood women's ijtihād circles, supported by mosques and NGOs, offering free courses in Arabic grammar, juristic methodology, and ethics, open to all genders but led by female scholars. Digital sovereignty platforms launch online portals where certified mujtahidat publish accessible fatwas and host live Q&A sessions. Integrate user feedback loops so rulings reflect lived realities. Public acknowledgement and leadership. Feature female muftis and scholars prominently in Friday sermons, academic conferences, and media interviews. Introduce awards recognizing groundbreaking contributions to Islamic law by women. Educational curriculum reform. Integrate modules on women's legal heritage, from Aisha to modern mujtahidat, into madrasa and university syllabi, reframing history to highlight female agency. Intergenerational mentorship networks. Pair emerging female scholars with senior mujtahidat for structured mentorship, guaranteeing the transmission of knowledge, scholarly ethics, and leadership skills. History will judge us by whether we let half the Ummah remain spectators or empower every soul to shape divine law. This manifesto is not a petition, it's a declaration. Women are not anomalies in Islamic scholarship, they are its heart. May these pillars stand as a beacon, guiding communities toward a Sharia that truly reflects the diversity, wisdom, and mercy of its creator.